Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon as we have a conversation with our governor, and the Governor Tom Wolf will describe for us some of the initiatives that we collectively want to build upon in the legislature and through his administration. We're here today to talk about issues about workforce safety, about issues around minimum wage, and so many other really important issues that we need to address as a Commonwealth, and quite frankly, issues that we have not been able to get through the legislature along those lines. My name is Jay Costa, and I have the privilege of serving as the Democratic leader in the Pennsylvania Senate, and it's really been my honor to represent our caucus and certainly many things along those lines. But I will tell you that one of the things that I've cherished the most over the past 7 years is the ability to work with a person who I think really epitomizes what it is to be a true leader, a leader in an area, a variety of areas. And I think it's interesting that we're here today at the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers, because this is a governor who I think many of us know over the past 7 years has made so much advancements in the space of education. When you think that we started $1 billion in a hole when he first came into office, the first day in office, and has restored so many resources along those lines, putting resources into our classrooms, putting resources into our communities to ensure that we do the right things. And it's ironic here that we're here today in an education building and the work that the PFT has done over those lines. I know Anita's here. I want to say hello to her as well. You know, there are a number of issues that we collectively have worked on, and I can tell you as someone who's had the privilege of working closely with this governor on many of the issues around Pennsylvania, certainly the ones that I think he has carried forward and really expressed a strong interest and desire to ensure that we take care of, that's always at the top of the list, is making sure that we look out for working people in Pennsylvania. Certainly, as I mentioned, with regard to our kids in our schools and resources there, but probably the one that I think it's most significant is the role that he's played with regard to wanting to ensure that our workers were safe, workplace safety, making sure folks are earning a minimum wage that was appropriate, which has consistently been a call that we've made together for so many years, and we simply can't get done, unfortunately. But we're going to continue talking about it and going forward along those lines. When you talk about workplace safety, you think about through this last 2 years, or 18 months, I should say, with this pandemic, the steps that the governor's taken to ensure that we had resources for our frontline workers through hazard pay programs and through many other things that needed to be done to protect our workers. There's more that we have to do, though. We have OSHA, statewide OSHA concerns that we have to talk about, which you'll hear from President Kelly talk about, I'm sure. But there's so many other things that need to be done. The purpose of today's gathering is to allow the governor to explain to us some of the things that he would like to do as we go forward and like to address. So it really is my true honor to introduce someone who I think has been an outstanding citizen of Pennsylvania, tremendous governor, advocating for the things that are important to the people of Pennsylvania, as I mentioned, our governor, Tom Wolf. Governor.
Thanks, Jay, and it's great to be here at PFT. I was saying earlier, I was actually here when it was first built, and I'm looking at the picture of Al Fondi. He was the one who gave me the tour, and talk about a champion for public education. He was that, and I hope that the things I learned and the values that I have brought to this position, my support for public education is really in many ways a tribute to what his ideas and the things that he thought were important. As Jay said, we're here today to talk about working Pennsylvanians. And we need to transform the world of work by transforming the world of work for Pennsylvania workers. We need to entice Pennsylvanians to the workplace. I mean, this is an issue that is affecting everybody right now all across the nation, but it's certainly an issue in Pennsylvania. But we want to make the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania a first choice home for innovative and forward-looking workers. We want to make a career here, and for the businesses, this is a good thing for them. We all know that the COVID pandemic has hit businesses hard. It's making it hard for them to hire workers. And that's really an interesting thing. I mean, in the last 18 months, we've seen some real challenges. But there are 4.3 million people who voluntarily left their jobs in August. 4.3 million people left their jobs voluntarily. And many of them were leaving their work for better pay. They were leaving their place of work, for better benefits, just basic things. And this is evidence of the considerable leverage that workers have right now. It's a time for all of us to think about how we change the workplace, and it has to be centered on our workers. With our economy on a comeback, plentiful work options are available, and that means that workers actually have a power they didn't have before. They have leverage to get things that they need. They have a lot of options for work, and they can choose to work for companies that keep them safe. They can choose to work for companies that offer them fair wages and benefits. And let's be clear, we want workers to have lots of options. We need to have workers have those options. The shortage of workers in certain industries is a nationwide issue. It's not unique to Pennsylvania, but we don't have to wait for the rest of the nation to come up with a solution. We can start right here in Pennsylvania. Let us step up. Let us lead in this moment. Let me give you a personal reflection. Up until 7 years ago, I was a business owner, and the world of work was my life. That was my place. And I would be active in all kinds of organizations and meet with business owners. And sometimes you'd hear how hard it was to get workers, good workers. The problem was that they weren't actually offering those workers much. And it wasn't an accident that they had trouble getting good workers, because they weren't paying them well. They didn't have a safe workplace. They didn't offer really good benefits, and they didn't offer really good career options. I used to go to roundtables all the time in my own business. And in my business, people all across the country were doing pretty much the same thing. But we always ended up outperforming other companies in our industry. And it wasn't because we were doing really unusual things. Everybody was pretty much doing the same thing, and if something changed, everybody pretty much changed. The one thing we were doing that was different, it turned out, was we were treating our workers better than the others were. And our workers responded by making our company more successful. That's a really well-kept secret. But right now, with so many people looking for work, and so many employers, looking for good workers, this is a chance to transform the workplace and make more companies in Pennsylvania successful. This is not a zero-sum game. This is a game that both sides need to get engaged in, and employers need to make sure workers are treated fairly so they actually want to perform. And if they do that, it works. That's my experience. So there are a lot of things that are out, a lot of theories, but practical experience is that this is actually good for businesses as well as for workers. So I am taking executive action today to help this process along and doing what I can do. And the first thing is I'm calling for legislative action as well as I'm taking executive action. But we want safer workplaces, three things. Safer workplaces, we want to promote higher wages, and we want guaranteed paid leave for workers. These three things are necessary, and they will not only help workers, but they're also going to transform the nature of work in Pennsylvania. And by the way, as I just said, these things are going to help businesses too. So let's start with safety. I signed an executive order this morning to call on the Department of Labor and Industry, which you'll hear from later, Secretary Barrier, and the Department of Community and Economic Development, you'll hear from Secretary Davin in just a minute, to study how occupational safety and health administration standards, the Osha standards, can be implemented in Commonwealth workplaces. Imagine my surprise when I realized that OSHA does not apply to the Commonwealth or public sector workers. Did you know that? Yeah, well, it's true. I'm also calling on the General Assembly to extend OSHA safety rules to all public employees in the workplace. Now, we can't do federal, I don't have any control over that, but the legislature can make this applicable to local, municipal, county governments, public sector workers all across Pennsylvania. Legislation has already been introduced in the Senate by Senator Tina Tartaglione and in the House by Representative Pat Harkins. That would make basically OSHA standards apply to all public sector workers. It's time for the legislature to pass that. We know that safety is a top-of-mind concern for employees, as it should be, following the COVID pandemic, but it's not the only thing that's important for workers. But that's the first thing. Second thing, we need fair wages, we need desirable benefits, and we need a better quality of life. They matter too. Too many hardworking people in Pennsylvania are forced to choose between losing a day's pay or coming into work when they're sick. They're providing paid leave, sick leave, would improve public health by keeping more workers safe in the workplace and would improve quality of life for workers and their families. There are too many workers out there who don't get sick pay. They're not allowed to stay home. The executive order I signed today requires the companies that receive grants from the governor's action team that they have to provide paid employee sick leave. I'm also calling on the General Assembly to pass legislation sponsored by Senator Vince Hughes and Representative Mike Zabel that would provide paid sick leave to all workers in Pennsylvania. Next and third, let's finally do something about the minimum wage. Workers are standing up and declaring that they deserve better than Pennsylvania's embarrassingly low minimum wage. Let's be clear, it is embarrassing. I already raised the minimum wage for state employees under my jurisdiction through an executive order I signed in 2018, although most Pennsylvania workers are making much more than this. I think there are a few part-timers that applied to. And I already raised the minimum wage for state employees, or that put people who are contracting with the state. The order put them on a path to earning $15 an hour, and it's past time that we do that for everybody. The General Assembly really needs to pass legislation. Unfortunately, while our Republican legislature refuses to act, Pennsylvanians are getting left behind. Are you aware that all of our neighboring states, West Virginia, Ohio, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland, all of them have higher minimum wages than Pennsylvania? That is embarrassing. It means that hardworking Pennsylvanians are getting paid less than the workers in all of those states. And there are about 1 million workers who would benefit from a higher minimum wage. I've been calling for an increase in this for 7 years now. Now, once again, I'm asking the General Assembly to pass Senator Tina Tartaglione's and Representative Patty Kim's legislation to raise Pennsylvania's unconscionably low minimum wage. These three actions, making the workplaces safer, promoting a higher minimum wage, guaranteeing paid leave, are cornerstone changes we need to make right now to make Pennsylvania a better home for workers and, again, for businesses. This plan is good for workers, it's good for businesses, it's good for every one of us. Unfortunately, many worker-friendly bills that would help workers and businesses in Pennsylvania are languishing in the General Assembly. So I'm calling on Republican leaders to immediately take action to support these bills for safer workplaces, better wages, and paid leave for workers. Our Commonwealth is at a turning point, whether we like it or not, and we need to do a better job making sure our workers have good places to come to work. So thank you, and now I'm very proud to turn this over to the Secretary of Labor and Industry, Secretary Jennifer Berrier. Secretary Berrier.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here today in the lovely city of Pittsburgh. As the governor has said, I am the Secretary of Labor and Industry, Jennifer Berrier. And today I am pleased to be here as a representative of the Wolf administration to support the governor's efforts to advance protections for Pennsylvania's workers. We are in the midst of a national conversation about the value of work and the dignity of individuals whose labor is the engine of our economy. That conversation has been driven primarily by the so-called labor shortage, a very complex phenomenon, but obvious to anyone who's seen all the help wanted signs in their neighborhood. And the data actually bears this out. A recent report from the demographic drought looked at the U.S. labor force participation rate, which measures the percentage of people working or actively seeking work compared to the total working-aged population. The labor force participation rate is the lowest it's been since the 1970s, recession 5 decades ago. That is crazy. And last week, the U.S. Department of Labor released its most recent data, which showed, as the governor said, that 4.3 million Americans voluntarily left their jobs in August alone. In the 21 years that the department has been collecting this data, there has never been a month where more people have quit their jobs. And naturally, the question on everyone's mind is why? Why is this happening? And certainly there are a lot of reasons that are very personal to these individuals, but we can look to the data for clues, for a collective truth. In August alone, 892,000 workers nationwide left accommodation and food service jobs. That means nearly 7% of that industry's workforce left in 1 month. And then another 721,000 workers left retail positions, representing a 4.7% of that industry's workforce. It is not a coincidence that jobs Americans are leaving are the ones that historically pay the lowest wages. We need restaurant workers, we need retail workers, but we cannot continue to expect people in our communities to choose jobs that do not pay a livable wage, especially in a market that gives them other options. When there is an overabundance of homes or apartments available, we call that a buyer's market, right? Well, today, we have a workers' market. First time I've ever heard of a workers' market, and this is a great opportunity. The large number of open jobs is giving people the opportunity to be selective about their employment, to choose jobs that offer the better pay, good working conditions, and the best opportunities for their future and their family's future. Governor Wolf's actions today meets this moment by centering the needs of Pennsylvania workers so they can support their families and build communities where all work is valuable and all workplaces abide by Pennsylvania's labor laws. The governor's executive order directs the Department of Labor and Industry to work with other Commonwealth agencies to ensure contractors and grant recipients are in compliance with labor and workforce safety laws, including the Minimum Wage Act, the Prevailing Wage Act, and the Equal Pay Law. We will be proactive in our efforts to inform vendors and grant recipients about labor and workplace safety laws and the consequence of noncompliance, including negative impacts on their eligibility for state grants and state contracts. The governor's executive order also directs Labor and Industry to make publicly available a list of organizations that violate labor laws, misclassify workers, owe unemployment compensation back taxes, or fail to carry the requisite workers' compensation insurance. And as the governor mentioned earlier, Labor and Industry will also work with the Office of Administration to study the feasibility of implementing the Occupational Safety and Health Administration standards in Commonwealth offices. I also joined Governor Wolf in urging the General Assembly to take action to help out-of-work Pennsylvanians, many of whom are facing hardships because of the COVID-19 pandemic. We support Representative Mullery's bill, House Bill 549, which amends the unemployment compensation law to streamline the process for eligible Pennsylvania workers to access the benefits to which they are entitled, which posed a problem to us during this pandemic. This bill includes provisions to strengthen Pennsylvania's unemployment compensation safety net to ensure that benefits are available to workers during future times of high unemployment and economic downturn. The time to take meaningful action that supports workers and promotes economic prosperity is now. That's why the governor has also directed Labor and Industry to update the Minimum Wage Act regulations to ensure workers are paid for all hours they work at their workplace. All workers deserve the security of a living minimum wage and the dignity of earning a wage that supports their families. As the governor said, 29 other states, including all of our neighbors, have increased their minimum wage, where Pennsylvania has stagnated for far too long. It's time that the law in Pennsylvania reflects our values. Every hardworking Pennsylvanian deserves a safe place to work, equitable opportunity in our economy, and a true living wage. I echo Governor Wolf on calling on the General Assembly to pass legislation that also meets this moment. At this time, I'm very pleased to introduce the Department of Community and Economic Development, Secretary Darren. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Barrier, and Governor. Thank you also for being here in Pittsburgh. So, for close to the past 7 years, I've had the honor of serving the people of Pennsylvania as a Secretary of the Department of Community and Economic Development. And in that time, we've really worked tirelessly, my colleagues and I, to make Pennsylvania a better place to live, work, and play. And one of our top priorities in that mission has been to empower our workforce, because when we help put people into good family-sustaining careers, the employers who place worker health and well-being at the center of their business philosophy, we know what kind of benefits that brings. It means people are happier and more productive in their jobs and more financially stable. It means they stay here in Pennsylvania and raise families and build communities. And it means we as a state attract talented workers from other states and countries right here in the Commonwealth, because they know this is a place where they can expand their careers. And with this executive order, the governor's announcing today, we're making Pennsylvania an even better place to work. The governor's order directs DCED through the governor's action team to add a new requirement for paid employer sick leave to our offers of assistance that we provide to these employers. And it includes offers including the Redevelopment Assistance Capital Program. The governor's action team will continue to require a minimum wage that meets or exceeds the minimum wage for state employees before making a financial incentive offer for any company. The current minimum wage for state employees is $13.50, and will reach $15 on July 1st, 2024, under an executive order the governor signed in 2018. The governor's action team is a group of business professionals within DCED who work with businesses that are looking to either expand in Pennsylvania or businesses that want to come into the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Their task is to help attract and retain businesses that provide good jobs to Pennsylvania workers. This executive order means that we will only invest in businesses that embody the core values of Pennsylvania's economy, including the belief that our workers and their families deserve benefits that will improve their physical and mental well-being. But I want to be clear, this announcement is great news for businesses just as it is for workers. The global labor shortage, as Secretary Berrier talked about, as the governor talked about, the global labor shortage is one of the biggest challenges that businesses have faced in decades. This lingering economic effect of the COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted the business landscape. But one of the best things businesses can do to combat labor challenges is to make themselves as appealing as possible to potential workers. And you see that every day when you read the paper in terms of what businesses are have started to do. And that means providing family-sustaining wages and benefits. It means a commitment to worker safety, career growth opportunities, and other worker-focused policies. And those policies are exactly what this executive order helps expand. The correlation being made here today is clear. When we enhance the well-being of our workforce, we enhance the well-being of our economy as a whole. Pennsylvania is the 18th largest economy in the world. Our strategic location is second to none. Our world-class educational institutions, abundant energy supply, and economic diversity make us the premier destination for businesses. But in this competitive landscape, we need to do more. We need to support our workers and businesses by expanding benefits and protections that keep our workers here in PA and attract workers from elsewhere. Governor Wolf's executive order accomplishes exactly that, and I'm excited to be part of this announcement that will further strengthen our economy. And now I'd like to introduce Darren Kelly, the president of the Allegheny Fayette Central Labor Council of the Afl-Cio. Darren.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Old friend Dennis, good to see you. Secretary Berrier, Governor Wolf, welcome to our home as always. Nina and your team, thank you once again for hosting this monumental day. This home, PFT, has hosted presidents. We have rolled out trade deals, and it's only fitting that this was announced here at this great hall. So thank you so much. To the state legislators that have joined us today, Representative Miller, good to see you. Representative Del Rosso, Jay, great friend, and I will be introducing the great Representative Jess Benham. You know, when we talk about things as simple as minimum wage, there is zero argument against raising something as simple as the minimum wage of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I truly welcome the chance to debate anyone on that basic fact. And the one thing when we're dealing with an issue like public sector OSHA, to know that every teacher, every firefighter, every crossing guard, every social worker that has been deemed through media and electeds on all sides as essential, but yet do not partake in the same protections as the men and women in the private sector. There's a little thing that we call hypocrisy that is truly a definition when it comes to something like this. So if these men and women are truly essential workers, and we put the responsibilities of things like the education of our children, the protection of our streets, the rescue from our police and firefighters, if you value that, value their ability to protect their families when they go home at night. When you look around in this country right now, from the prestige of Hollywood down to our universities, workers are standing strong. Workers are deeming that they've had enough, not for show, not for argument, but for their piece of the American dream, their warm piece of the sidewalk. It is a shame that a pandemic has caused that. But with that being said, a wake-up call has been initiated, is that the workers are the economic engine of this city, this Commonwealth, this country, and as we see, worldwide. And to have an engine work properly, and to be there when you need it, you have to pay them properly, respect them, allow them to retire with dignity, allow them to get benefits when they get sick that they're taken care of, and most importantly, do not rob them of their American dream. Help them make that a reality. Governor, thank you so much for not just this hand across the table, but also allowing Pennsylvania to be the center of attention nationally, to realize that workers make this country grow. So thank you so much to you and your team, and to rolling this out in such a great place like the PFT. My friends, it is an honor and a pleasure for me to bring up Representative Jessica Benham, who is one of the most hardworking legislators we've seen in a long time, representing our South Hills, and is always there standing with workers. Representative Jess Benham, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It is so wonderful to have you all here in the 36th District, which I have the absolute pleasure and honor of representing in our State House. So, Governor, thank you for being here today. When I stepped up to serve my community, it was in the midst of this pandemic, at a time where our government was failing workers even more than our government has always failed working Pennsylvanians. Let's be clear, our government has never worked for working people, which is why, as a working person, I stepped up to serve. Now, in my district, our workforce is primarily healthcare workers, teachers, food and hospitality workers, first responders, and of course, so many others. People who, as my dear friend Darren Kelly stated, have been called essential by people like me, standing up here in our fancy suits. And so I stepped up to fight alongside all of the working Pennsylvanians in my district for things like a living wage, like paid sick and family leave, and for safety at work. These basic rights and protections that every working Pennsylvanian should be entitled to. And it has been an honor to be in that fight alongside so many people in this room, not just my colleagues in the General Assembly, but my constituents, who I'm reminded by every day that, this is make it or break it, that East Carson Street and Brownsville Road do not survive without workers. that our business districts, which are the heart and soul of South Pittsburgh, do not make it without workers. And so it is an absolute privilege to stand here with so many who are advocating for these essential pieces of legislation. And yet, I'm going to go to Harrisburg next week, and I'm not sure what we're voting on, but I'll be frankly shocked if it's any of this. And that's sad, because that is not what my constituents send me to Harrisburg for, and I don't think it's what the constituents of any of my colleagues send us to Harrisburg for, to sit there with a rainy day fund and not use it to help working Pennsylvanians who are struggling now more than they ever have. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Governor, Leader, and of course Secretaries and Darren Kelly for your work, because it is wonderful to be in this fight. And yet it's a fight that I hope soon we will win. Thank you all. And with that, I'll hand it back to our governor.
Okay, we're happy to take any questions. Yeah.
When it comes to the sick leave executive order, how many days annually would that guarantee?
It doesn't have a specific day guarantee, so we will look at that and see if this was a real effort. But I think different companies will come up with probably different time frames. At the outset, we don't have a specific day requirement on that.
Okay, but eventually would you anticipate setting some type of standard?
I think we right from the outset, we want to have a reasonable standard, but we recognize that some might have different standards than others, and we'd be open to that argument. What we want to see is paid time off.
Okay, and then as far as the number of workers who would be impacted, do you have a sense when it comes to each of the executive orders?
I don't. Do you have any idea how many? I can get that information for you. I don't have it off the top of my head. Yep.
When we talk about legislation being introduced, are we talking about one piece of legislation that's comprehensive with all of the points that were expressed today, or are we talking about multiple pieces?
There are three that I think we're talking about with the minimum wage. We're talking about one with paid time off, and we're talking about a specific bill that would extend Osha to a piece of legislation that would extend to all public sector workers. Now, there was a fourth piece of legislation, Representative Mullery's bill, that would actually make the unemployment compensation system benefits better for workers. So
the next question is, how steep of a climb in getting these pieces of legislation approved? And what are you looking at with regards to the challenges there?
Well, I mean, they're great. I've been trying for 7 years to raise the minimum wage, and I think there is this and that's why I said what I said about coming out of the business sector. This is something that is really important for workers, but it's also important for businesses. I think Darren Kelly said it really well. This is the engine of every business, and a business cannot be successful if the engine is not hitting on all cylinders. And the engine is not going to hit on all cylinders if the workers are not being treated fairly. And that means more than what we're talking about here, but at a bare minimum, what we're talking about here to move the Commonwealth forward. So I think one of the problems in Harrisburg is right now, first of all, the folks represented workers like Jess and Jay, there are not enough of us. But I think another misconception is that this is something that is a zero-sum game. If workers benefit, businesses don't. And I need to say, we need to do a better job convincing our Republican colleagues, who presumably should understand this, that workers are absolutely central to a very successful business. You want to perform well, you got to treat your workers well. Yes.
Governor, what do they say to you, this governor, leader, the GOP leaders, et cetera, who are opposed to these kind of bills? I imagine they don't say they're anti-worker, but what are their biggest arguments or concerns from either the Republicans or the business community that we have to address then?
It's that somehow, and it's the same thing I think that led so many American businesses to go overseas. that they could free ride on a really cheap source of labor. But I think businesses have found, which is at the heart of the onshoring movement, that they didn't work. That actually American workers treated well, or workers treated well, are going to perform much better and serve the customers, whether it's in a service industry or a goods industry, much better than somebody who's not paid well. And so I think it might take a little time to figure that out. I think we need to help our colleagues figure that out, that actually that's a penny wise and dollar foolish strategy. So treat workers well, you actually end up doing well for yourself.
And then aside from the wage side, is there also opposition to the other types of bills? Do you see less opposition perhaps to adding sick leave or some of these OSHA requirements, other things? Do you think there might be less?
I think there's a predisposition to look at anything that imposes extra, what they see as extra costs on businesses as something that ought to be avoided. I think maybe their thought is that if business thought it made sense, they'd do it. But I think we've seen, as I talked about in the offshoring movement, that what seemed attractive in the short run really didn't work out. And this is something that in my experience over the long run doesn't work out. If you want to get good results, you got to pay for it. If you want a society that is healthy, good roads, good bridges, you got to invest in those things. So there is nothing you get for free, and that includes a good, successful company. You need to treat the people who are the engine of your company fairly. Again, we need to make that point and keep pushing that home, that this is something that is obviously good for workers, but it's also good for the companies they work for.
And then on the release also mentioned kind of shaming the bad actors with a public list of those who are violating existing labor laws and the like. Is that already happening in some form, and what kind of form will this public list take?
It's not the public shame. We do have a list. What there, I think 29,000, if that's approximately, that haven't paid their unemployment compensation bill, don't have workers' insurance, compensation insurance, all those things. One of those things, and so the list is there, I think, right?
We're developing the list.
So we're developing the list. It exists, but now we want to put some teeth into it. And again, these are folks who just haven't paid the bill. Once they pay their bills, once they get right, they can get off that list. But it's a pretty substantial list.
Online, presumably then, kind of thing.
It'll be on our website, Labor and Industries website.
Yes.
What would you say to the businesses that have struggled the last year and a half, and they don't really have any extra income? We're seeing a lot of small businesses essentially dying off. And if you make them provide paid sick leave and higher wages, they're not going to be able to survive. And I know that's a big conversation.
Yeah, having spent my entire life, except for the last 7 years in business, I don't buy that. First of all, there are 30-some states in the union with higher minimum wage than we have in Pennsylvania. I don't see 30 states suffering and businesses in those states suffering. Second, as I found to my great delight when I was in business, we did well by treating our workers well, and we could compare and contrast. And I was in a business that was not known for high wages, building products, residential building products, lumber yards, and yet we paid at the top of the market. We shared we had Cadillac benefits, all those things, and we were very profitable. So I think it's a misunderstanding, a misconception that stiffen your workers is the way to high profitability. Doesn't work that way. It does not work that way. That is bad business. And businesses who believe that's the way they ought to do it, they ought to change their approach.
Time for one more?
If
Yeah.
this doesn't get through the General Assembly, is there anything else your office can do to try to get this legislation done, or whatever?
Yeah, well, that's why part of this is an executive order. I can control things in the executive branch, which is, 80,000 employees. I can control things with money that comes through the executive branch to companies that want public money, companies that want to do contract work for the state government. I can control that, but some of this needs legislation, which is why we're pushing that. I think for that, we need to keep working to get people elected who understand this. And in the meantime, we need to do things like we're doing here today to publicly explain why these things are important to Pennsylvania. I think the pandemic has helped in that explanation because there were a lot of theories as to why companies are finding it hard to attract employees. One of them was that the unemployment compensation benefit was too rich. Well, you haven't heard that recently because, 30 or 26 states, I guess, dropped the $300 early, and in August we had a chance to see that that didn't make any difference at all. And now every state has gone beyond the $300 premium, and we're still having trouble. Companies are still having trouble finding employees. So I think the pandemic has shone a light on exactly how important this really is. We want good workers to commit themselves to make our companies successful. We're going to have to pay for that. We're going to have to invest adequately in those workers, and I think we need to do everything we can to keep making that point.
I want to speak of one last question. Governor, going back to a previous question about the affordability for companies or small businesses to make these adjustments, that's a very real problem, and there are some who I don't think would believe it was fair or would be fair for you to compare your business to what other businesses are going through now.
I'm not sure you're being fair to my business. I had small business. Well, wait. I want to take issue with what you said. Your premise is wrong. Small business, large business, medium-sized business. My business was not big, and I had a bunch of small businesses, and they all had to compete with small businesses. They were in a minimum wage world, and we chose not to pursue that stingy path, and it worked out really well. And if it worked out well for my business, it'll work out well for any business, small, big, medium size, or whatever. So that your premise is wrong, that my experience actually is relevant to what's going on in the rest of the world.
Okay, so I'll continue with my question.
Yeah.
There are some businesses that still might not agree with you. My question is, are there grants or is there any financial leverage for some of these businesses to acquire grants to make these upgrades and up their standards based on what you're calling for today?
I'm not planning on anything like that. I really think that would be an admission that this is not a sensible strategy. And I'm telling you, it is a sensible strategy. And I'm sorry that I think you're right that there are companies out there and employers who don't agree with this, but they're wrong.